Okay, thank you, Amy, for joining us today and sharing this information. So go for it.
All right, I will. Thanks, Janet. It's been a pleasure to work with you and Debbie and Robin, and I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity to share this event model that we created to help librarians. I have to say to my library colleagues that when I call you the nation's help desk, I genuinely mean it and have a great deal of empathy for the work that you do. I've said this for many years prior to the pandemic, but today more than ever, being super creative about how we help people. And so I appreciate you taking time to be here, and I hope that you find the information I share valuable. The Oasis Connections program, if I can move my slides here, has been helping people with technology literacy since 2000, and we had our first internet safety class developed in 2004. Not a lot of people were interested in online safety and internet safety in 2004, but demand is increasing. According to librarians, we have some of the most popular Microsoft Office curriculum that they've ever used. So if you're looking for Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel in particular, we have those courses in beginner and intermediate, and they work very well for people who are learning to use those skills. 20 of our courses, including Intro to Microsoft Word, have been translated to Spanish, and so have the videos that I'm going to share with you today. Additionally, because all of you are navigating issues with how do you hold classes now, that wonderful number that Janet just quoted about the number of public library classes we held last year is going to look dramatically different this year. We don't know when some of us are ever going to be able to hold in-person classes this year, particularly those of us who deal with older adults. So I'm open to your ideas about any flipped classroom or anything that you're doing. If you want to contact me later about that. My first goal is to help Oasis virtualize itself nationwide, and then I will get back to virtualizing Connections classes. So excited to hear all the great things you're doing, and if we can be an asset, we'd love to help. So in that regard, we have a YouTube playlist about how to facilitate classes through Zoom. I know that some of you aren't going to use Zoom as a platform for a variety of reasons, but if you're needing help using the Zoom tool, we've created videos more for facilitators than for end users, but we do have some materials for end users too. So without further ado, I will talk about our thriving library partnerships, and this is a picture taken in the St. Charles City County Library District, who's been our partner for 7 years. The other thing you can think about is our materials really help librarians stay current. So if you're working and want to have staff trainings with our materials, that works very well to help librarians who may not feel that they're an expert on certain topics become more capable of teaching classes. So the online safety and you event model is what I'm going to be demoing here. At the end of this presentation, you'll have a link to go to our web page where you will find the instructions for the event, a script, and a Train the Trainer video. So the video, or the presentation rather, that I run you through this morning, I'm going to do it fairly quickly because there's a recording on the website that you can go watch. I have opted not to give a lot of examples in that recorded video because it's hard to give first-person accounts of cybersecurity stories and make sure that they're repeated correctly. So I encourage you to use your own stories that you know from working with your customers, and also to start discussions among your participants because they have their own stories to share, and you can educate based on the stories that are shared in the room. But you also have a PowerPoint presentation that's all ready to go, the same one that you'll be working with, that I'll be sharing with you today. There's a handout that accompanies each of the 5 videos, and all of the videos and all of the handouts are translated to Spanish. So this model should work well for Spanish language audiences, but I don't have the slide deck in Spanish. The promotional flyer is also available in Spanish, and the event survey. So all of that is available for you to download from the website. The webpage will give you on the last slide of this presentation. So online safety and you. AT&T is the primary funder and has been for 20 years of the Connections program, and AT&T does care very much about people being safe online. And so they have funded the creation of this model, and they wanted me to be able to disseminate it as widely as possible to library partners, to people and older adults serving capacities. So if you have any colleagues there, you can share this information with them. And additionally, if you live in a market that AT&T serves, it is possible to have an AT&T employee come out and present this. You would need to get in touch with me to be able to do that, or you'd need to let somebody that you know at AT&T do that. So our agenda today: who's more vulnerable to scams? How do you fight back against scam tactics? What are the best tips to stay online, safe online every day? And how AT&T and Oasis can help you. So who is more vulnerable to scams? I really like this picture because you're not sure actually who we're talking about. And as you can see from the FBI stats moving forward, both older adults and young people are vulnerable to scams. And in reality, we are all vulnerable to scams and frauds that are being proliferated online. But the complicating factor for older adults is having more wealth. People over 50 hold 83% of the wealth in America. That's through retirement accounts, pensions, paid off mortgages, and these types of assets that they have worked their whole life for. So that is one reason that older adults can be a better target for cyber criminals, but I think it's important to remember that cyber criminals are trying to find any target. But when they find an older adult target, they often have deeper pockets to steal from. Complicating factor number 2 is there are special scams that apply just to older adults. Many of you are familiar with the grandparent scam, Social Security, funeral and cemetery, reverse mortgages, Medicare, health insurance, and a big area is fraudulent anti-aging products. Of course, in the COVID-19 pandemic, we're seeing fraudulent coronavirus cures, vaccines. All of these things are being targeted to people who are a little bit scared of the coronavirus, and in terms of aging, people who are looking for cures for aging. There's not a cure for aging. We promote at Oasis that you just do your best job aging, and so none of these products, they often aren't backed up by science, and they're just people trying to make money off of our youthful culture. Complicating factor number three is age-associated financial vulnerability. When I read this statistic, I was a little bit dismayed because it's at age 49, your ability to assess financial information starts to diminish. So many of us on the call are actually already considered having a little bit of age-associated financial vulnerability. And that just means that you can't sort out all of the different details of offers. You know how when you get an offer or you read an online agreement, it's a legal document, there's all these things to agree to and all of this legalese to navigate through. So as our brains age, they aren't always able to sort out information like that as well as they did when we were younger. But we also have to consider people with dementia and Alzheimer's who are getting information from scams and frauds, from cyber criminals rather, about scams and frauds, and that if we as people without cognitive decline can't sort out what scammers are doing, it's very hard for someone with dementia or Alzheimer's too. The other thing to remember is that social isolation increases dramatically. The longer you live, the more you outlive your peers, and your social network will automatically shrink if you haven't worked to make intergenerational connections and relationships. Layer that on it, the pandemic and older adults being asked to shelter in place and stay inside, and you have the makings for social isolation. So if you're isolated and someone starts to give you attention, even if it's a scammer posing as someone else, of course, this is a big risk for an older adult. Okay, the FBI has a Internet Crimes Unit that publishes a report every year. And so these are the newest numbers just published at the end of February. You can see that the two categories I highlighted were the over 60 group, which is up 186 million. And remember, again, that number is increased because when people can get a hold of an older adult, they can have access to more cash to drain. And additionally, the under 20 group, up 409 million. Under 20, those crimes against children often happen without their knowledge. And so when someone gets a hold of a child's name, social security number, and date of birth, you can open credit accounts under that person's name. And since you don't open your first credit account until you're maybe 18, maybe 22 when you graduate from college, people can use those identities for many, many years to set up credit in the child's name. So I think that's where that increase comes from. The report didn't detail that. But the crime types, notice that the biggest is continually business email compromise. And that is for all of you that have a role and a job at a public library, a municipality, a university library, wherever you are getting pelted with emails hoping that you will click on a link that will give away your personal credentials, some kind of login information for your work email, particularly if you're in an accounting department, right? Because if you're in an accounting department, then we already know that you are a person with access to money. And so being able to get to people who have credentials to wire money, of course, helps criminals get more money. So that's the biggest area of cyber crime. That's the biggest crime type. But for the participants that you're working with, if they are older and they're retired, then confidence and romance scams are still the number one. In addition to government impersonation has gone up 60 million in 1 year. Tech support scams have gone up 15 million, but that's 40% higher than just 1 year before. So tech support scams are very effective, or they wouldn't be going up so wildly. In addition, charity fraud, which has been large and only went up 1 million in 1 year, but that's still an extraordinary amount, is of course something that's really going on right now in the wake of the pandemic. And so any kind of, you can pose to be a charity that you're not, and a cyber criminal can pose and send out information that makes you feel like you should donate to a charity that isn't even legitimate. So it's important to research the charity. AT&T did their own research last year, and they found that 95% of older Americans, they went with the number 60 and older, had experienced a scam online. 92% of older Americans have experienced some sort of phishing attempt, right? We're all getting emails all the time. And 71% of older adults have encountered a malicious actor, so someone claiming to be someone else. This behavior is all very common. Many of us are dealing with it. The issue is that the attacks become more automated, they look more realistic, and they are becoming harder for people to sort out. So how do you fight back? So if you pre-registered, Janet had sent you a link to watch the videos prior. I'm not going to watch the videos live with you because I want to get through the slides and give you time to ask questions. So this is the most valuable that can be for you. But this is our video on catfishing and romance scams. I have had a couple of people from law enforcement reach out from around the country and tell me that this is the best video that they've seen to explain how catfishing or romance scams work for older adults. So I hope that you will find it helpful. But the main gist of it is that you need to be wary of someone that connects with you out of the blue. So, I think the common theme with all of these scams is if you're being asked to do something that you weren't expecting, is it legit? And what are the consequences if you do not reply to this person? Are there any really bad consequences that can come if you get some kind of an email or dating someone reaching out? There may not be. You have to assess that, or you have to ask your people to assess that all the time. You want to be wary if the person's picture is very attractive, and they may not be real if they found another photo they can use on the internet. If it's somebody you're already connected to, right? That happens in Facebook a lot. We have a blog article on that phenomenon and how you can sort out what happens if somebody else is spoofing one of your friends' identities and trying to reconnect with you to get information from you. If they live a long distance away from you, or if they're not in your age group, especially for older adults, when younger people are wanting to date or befriend them, it can be a red flag. Be wary if you have everything in common that's a social engineering tactic that people use. And be very wary when people are unable to meet, talk live, or video conference. They can't talk in real time. There's usually a compelling reason why. Okay, demanding payment with a gift card, again, very common. No real business or government agency is going to ask for payment by gift card. Gift cards should be for gifts and nothing else. Scams that utilize gift cards are emotionally powerful. They always have a sense of urgency, and they're asking you to take action to prevent a tragedy often. Again, in the current times, you can imagine that scammers are using this tactic to defraud people. How to spot charity scams, pretending to be a charity that they're not. So be sure to look at the website and the social media for this entity. You can also research all charities on Charity Navigator, GuideStar, and the Better Business Bureau Wise Giving Alliance. And, you know, if the charity is local, you certainly can become a volunteer for the charity. Starting the volunteer process will give you a lot of information about if the charity is legit, if they really want to interact with you, or if they just want your money. So these are all ways that you can, the video really outlines it very, very nicely. Other tips to stay safe online every day. Okay, one of the things that we created for this event model when we were doing in-person events, and for most of you, I'm assuming that you might do this as a virtual event if you're not able to reopen soon. If you're able to reopen soon, this is a great way to have an in-person event. But we created this Post-it note to remind people to protect their personal information and passwords, to carefully screen emails and avoid scams, to think before you click on a link, the importance of creating complex passwords unique to each site, which is a really daunting task for many people, not just older adults, and to check your personal accounts and account balances regularly. It has 2 web pages on there, the AT&T.com/cyberaware website, which has beautiful videos and lots of other information. In addition, our safety page, which has all the videos collected in one location that you could go to. A lot of people said to me, Amy, why'd you give me a Post-it note that I can't write on? This Post-it note was meant for you to be sort of a viral way to share something in person. Our goal was for older adults who come to these events, they often want to convince somebody else also to be safe. So it's something you can give to someone else. It's a Post-it you can put on a PC, on a tablet, on the refrigerator, just a way to share information. So we did use those. Again, a lot of people didn't understand why we gave them a Post-it note they couldn't write on, but I was trying to create some kind of viral sharing that's real time and not online. Locking your phone. Those of you who use a smartphone, I'm just getting my phone here to show you that I've done, if I can get it without a reflection. I've done what we ask. If found, please call Amy. This video tells you how to put a lock screen on your phone and put personal contact information, whether it's somebody else's phone number or it is an email address. It gives the person who finds a phone a way to contact you. If you're out and about and you find a phone and it doesn't have any identifying information, and you can give it to somebody, but I mean, the person's going to have to backtrack and figure out where that phone is. So having identification right on the phone screen is easy. It can be a little bit challenging to make a note and make it your wallpaper. So I tell people the easiest way is to write this information on a piece of paper, take a picture of it, and then make that your screen lock picture. But that's what this video is about. It also tells you how to turn on the lost iPhone and Android phone features. And we'll also share with you the statistics about how much more likely you are to get your phone back if you do this. True story, everything that we recommend that people do, I do so that I understand before we're recommending whether it's easy, whether it's something that people are actually going to do. So I did this right when we were creating the video and went on a business trip. It was winter, and when I got back to the airport and I was in St. Louis, I was getting my baggage off the baggage claim. My phone slipped out of my pocket, but I did not know it. I walked out of the airport, and one of my family members was picking me up. So I just walked out, got in the car, we drove off, and by the time we were getting on Highway 70, their phone was ringing. They were my emergency contact. And so when the phone rang, and it was from, we didn't know who it was, an unknown caller. We didn't answer the first time. And then the second time we decided, well, who's this person that's calling again? It was the police station in the St. Louis airport saying, we have Amy's phone. So I was able to turn around and get my phone back within a matter of 20 minutes. So it really does work. And so I suggest to everybody that you do that. It's not as fun as having a beautiful picture that you like to look at on your lock screen, but it does help you get your phone back if you need it. Okay, so I talked about setting a passcode, a PIN. Maybe I didn't talk about that. We're going to make sure you set a passcode or PIN. You're going to find older adults don't always do that. They will also say things to you like, I don't have anything on this phone. Well, if some well-meaning relative has set up their email for them, that's your email access, that's your contact list. There's actually a lot of information on someone's smartphone, even if you don't view it as something that is highly valuable. It's highly valuable in a social engineering and cyber criminal way, because it gives a person a lot of information about you and about who you are in touch with. So it's very important to keep your phone locked at all times, and it also keeps other people out of your phone. For older adults, that's grandchildren who want to play on their phones all the time. So it's just another way to use that. Of course, as librarians, I would expect that you are aware to be very careful what you share on social media. And there's lots of stories about people oversharing on social media. So you just want to be careful what you post, where you post it, what you're sharing, because there's a lot of personal private information you can be giving away. So that's what this video talks about, because social media is not private, even when you set all the privacy settings. Not all people who are on social media are genuine people, right? And so I think that for the average person, particularly older adults, they don't understand what a deep fake or a spoofer or somebody that's not representing who they actually are, a bot, for instance, they aren't thinking that that person is not who they say they are. I think there's been more information about fake news and disinformation recently, but it's so difficult to parse out how it actually works that it doesn't seem like reality. So also think twice before participating in social media surveys. Here we have a screen that tells you how to report different types of fraud. So the FTC, idtheft.gov, and IC3 is where I get all of the data for that report. From that, the figures that I quote. So those are places that people can report and get information, and they're all government sites because those are the reporting and governing bodies. So AT&T and Oasis together have been helping people avoid internet frauds and scams for at least 16 years. AT&T has one of the most robust platforms for helping consumers sort out cybercrime in their cyber-aware website. They do really care because they are creating assets and helping people navigate cybercrime, and that's available to anybody, not just to AT&T customers. But they also have some apps that they've created, AT&T Mobile Security for iOS and Android. And so if you have an AT&T person come and do your presentation for you, they will explain more about this. All of the major carriers have these kinds of apps, and they do help cut down on different types of calls. So it's best to have somebody from AT&T explain these, and so normally that's what I do. But these are apps that are available, AT&T Call Protect, and so those are an option as well. And you can tell people that if they're not an AT&T customer, but they have a smartphone, they can ask their carrier what kind of apps are available to help them protect. The main takeaway, because when you get through, if you do all 5 of the videos that I've highlighted and you talk about the Post-it note, you're giving people like 50 different tips, which is a whole lot for anybody to digest. The main thing we want people to leave with is, if you ever feel uncomfortable with something you've received on email or by phone call, check with somebody first. For isolated older adults, this person is often a librarian. So as I said before, your capacity as the nation's help desk, sometimes people just need to talk through the fraud and scam. And as they're talking through it with you, they're like, oh, that sounds really like a hoax when I say it out loud. So just being that person that you can help them walk through, well, what would happen if you did respond to this? What could happen? What could happen if you didn't respond to this? And that way, you're helping them think through the kinds of messages they're getting. So that was very fast, but you can download all the pieces of the event models with this link, and it's a link I created. Oops, leave it up there so you can see it. That would be easy for people to type in. So it does not need to be case sensitive. I just made the uppercase and lowercase so it will be easier for you to read. But it's a bit.ly link, and you go to Oasis 2020, and sorry, my camera's in my way, Cybercrime Fighters, to be able to get all of the model information. And that's also in the slide, the PDF that Janet passed out to everybody when they attended. So at this point, I would like to open up for questions, because I think that if you're even considering teaching this, you're going to want to ask me anything about giving the presentation. I will say that I really encourage after every video that you show that you ask for people's reaction, because so many times the people in your audience have already experienced these things, and so you get themes coming up again and again. But I also, myself and the people who regularly teach this class, we are frequently surprised at the way that we hear a scam is just morphing a little bit every time we give this class. So I'll give you one story, and then I'll open it up for questions. The last time I facilitated this was online in St. Louis, and we had a gal join the call, and she had gotten a new smart TV the week before. She had a smart TV that she set up about 3 years ago. It died. But when she set that first smart TV up, she set up a Netflix account on the smart TV. She doesn't access the Netflix account in any other way but through the smart TV. So she doesn't get emails from them, etc. Well, as you can imagine, 3 years later, she didn't remember what her password was to get back into Netflix. So she got that resolved and set up the Netflix on the new TV, only to get an email supposedly from Netflix asking her to share some security questions. And so she had the wherewithal to think that this could be a hoax or a scam or a fraud, but she wasn't sure. And since she'd gotten the email for the class at Oasis, she joined the class, and that was her question. Well, of course, during the pandemic, there's been a huge rise in Netflix scams, because many people are getting a Netflix account for the first time, or they're using a Netflix account that they may not have used for a while. So it was a scam. She did not reply, but that was a use case I hadn't thought about, that a person would only set up their Netflix on their smart TV and not remember what their password was when they were starting that process. And then 3 years pass, and you've got to figure out what your Netflix password was and what email you used. All right, so having said that, we can go ahead and I will open the chat window if I can find it here. And Janet, do you want to guide me on?
So first we had a comment about GoFundMe accounts that are difficult with charities to know if they're actual,
Great.
Yes.
To
a charity or a scam.
That's a good question. So I have read about that, and I know that a GoFundMe is an easy way for people to create an artificial charity or charitable situation, and then they share it on Facebook. I would say that I haven't seen these personally too often, but I could do a little bit more research and try to find that out and see if we could write a blog on it. I know that one of my friends had a true family member who they set up a GoFundMe for, and when I saw it in her Facebook feed, I wrote to her and said, is this really and I didn't use Facebook. I saw it on Facebook. I didn't use Facebook. I went to her personal email and said, hey, is this legitimate? And it was. And then I donated to it. But I'm fairly hesitant with GoFundMe. My daughter's in an activity and they wanted to use GoFundMe. And I said, I wish we'd use something else because it can be seen as, fraudulent. But it was a easy tool for the club to use. And so they went ahead and used it. I hope that helps. I know it's not a great answer, but I can do some more research on it.
Okay, thank you. Then had another question. So they have a patron who is a quadriplegia who has to keep his phone unlocked so he can use Siri to operate the phone. So
wow,
how can you secure a phone or a device when they're...
Ooh, that is a challenging one.
And somebody gave a suggestion of facial recognition.
That's where I was going to go. I was going to say, so facial recognition, if the phone is new enough and you can enable it, then that would be the most helpful way. But I'm trying to think of how, and if they can't pick up their phone, how do they get the phone then in a position where the face would be the easiest. And the facial recognition, one of the benefits for people with dementia is that they don't have to remember a passcode. And so when they look at their phone, it will open for them. So that's a really challenging question. And I encourage anybody who has a better answer than me to chime in. I think that's one of the most beneficial things about these events. We do learn from each other, and every question that I'm asked or that my facilitators are asked, we start thinking about angles that we haven't thought of. So if facial recognition is an option, I would try that. But I feel like that's sort of an inadequate answer.
Yeah. Well, and one person said they think they can toggle on the setting, allow Siri when locked. So that might be an option.
Yes, that is true. You can allow Siri when locked. That is true. And then I think you would want to enable Hey Siri so you can use the listening device as well to be listening for Hey Siri.
And one of our colleagues here at Wolfner Library stated that Android has a voice passcode.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so that would definitely help for someone with some dexterity issues. That's great.
Yeah. And then the person with the original question put in the model of the phone. So can you talk about how you need to think about options that vary based on models?
Oh my gosh, that is the bane of our existence. So we love to create materials that will help you do a better job. But every time we publish any book, it's almost immediately out of date. So I can point you to our website has a mobile accessibility guide that we received funding to create about 3 or 4 years ago. We've updated it, I think, 3 years ago. There's one for Android. There's one for iOS. And the guides to the accessibility features are still current. But of course, both Google and Apple have moved where the accessibility menu is, supposedly to make it more accessible for folks. And I just want to say, many of us knew where it was. So that book is available. I would say that if you can afford an iPhone, iOS and Apple is much less likely to be moving things because Google is open source. A Google or Android phone creates different kinds of challenges. The first is that because it's open source, both the manufacturer of the phone, as in Samsung or LG, and the carrier, the mobile carrier, so AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, or T-Mobile, all have the ability to move things in the menu. And that's why you can have 2 people in a class who are sitting with the same phone next to each other, but they have completely different menuing structures. And so that's unfortunately not helpful when you're helping people learn how to use a new technology or navigate it. But I know that iPhones are typically more expensive than Android, and that's one reason why a lot of people choose Android. And I know that they've created models of phones that are much more cost effective, but these devices are very expensive. And so I'm not making that recommendation lightly. It's just that if you need something that's going to continue to be usable over time and is pretty easy to adopt, I find that people that have Apple devices have an easier time than people who have Android devices. There are also special devices made for older adults like the GrandPad, which is a really interesting device. It's very designed to be very friendly for older adults who've never touched any technology, and it can be a good option. And I think the Jitterbug, I don't know if they're still making that, but the Jitterbug phone for older adults was very popular at one time, and people still talk about it.
Do you have any language suggestions to stress the importance of security awareness for everyone? I sometimes fear that my patrons will feel I am talking down to them for making what they may see as obvious suggestions.
That's a good question. I would say that, I think focusing on the fact that we're an information society now, that it's really not about you and me, it's about the shift in society, that information about us is super valuable now, and that there are ways that information is being collected that we don't even think about. And so if you can go through that lens, I think that could be helpful. And the other thing that becomes tricky is that security and privacy are really two separate issues, but users often think they are one and the same. And so helping people understand the difference between security, which is the settings that you set up to make things secure, versus privacy, which is how you share your information. And I don't know if I'm giving the best definition of that on the fly here, but people will call them, they think they're talking about the same thing, and they're not necessarily, particularly from a legal aspect. So trying to just stress information society and that information is everywhere, and that you want to minimize what you share, maybe that'll help. I'm open to that not being a full answer.
And Amy, I would think in the training that they provide their patrons, they want to go over security versus privacy and kind of give them tips on each.
Yeah, and we were, it was interesting that we wanted to call this internet safety. We didn't talk a lot about privacy in the presentation itself, just for that very reason. But it's good if you can define the differences a little bit. This slide deck doesn't really have the greatest delineation about it. But yes, that's a good idea. And if we're out of questions, we can, I can do a little bit more on the slide. I just want to make sure people got to ask their questions. I see there's a comment that GrandPads have been sold out. So I wonder, meaning that they just don't have, they haven't made enough of the devices for people to get them. I wasn't aware of that change with GrandPads, so good to know.
Okay, so for libraries that are still closed and
yes,
cannot do in-person classes now and may not do in-person classes for a while, even after they open, how can they present material like this to their patrons?
So we did it as a virtual session, and it worked quite well. The thing you'll want to be aware of is, can you enable the showing of the YouTube videos through whatever interface you're using? And the most important thing about that is that you share your audio. because this presentation, and you just saw it all without showing the videos, is a lot of the content comes from what's in those YouTube videos. So let's go back a little bit. Let's see if my screen will go backwards.
I know a lot of the training when you're in person, the benefit is that the patron can have their phone and you can go through, okay, this is where you go to do this. This is where you go to do this. So
yes,
that obviously won't happen virtually. So our recommendations to, okay, if you have a family member to help you with that, or bring your item
yes,
into the library, and of course that's going to be different of how they bring that in. Do you have to make an appointment for that now? You know?
exactly. So we're struggling with that as well. So let's start with, if you did this, so the first thing I'm going to say is that I'm a big advocate of digital equity and digital inclusion. And obviously doing this webinar, this as a digital event or a virtual event, leaves out a whole bunch of folks who need the information. I have talked to 2 of our Oasis centers about the potential for offering this as a telephone-based training, and just talking about the scams and talking about the points in the video. If you're really dealing with a group of people who has no home internet, then they can't watch YouTube videos. So I think that you can adapt this to be a virtual model by phone where you're getting people ready for the internet. Because what I'm thinking is the next digital divide is really going to be the people who get on the information superhighway, if you still want to call it that, and they have no knowledge of cybercrime, right? We give them the keys to the internet and don't tell them that you're going to get all these emails and people are going to be trying to steal all kinds of information from you. So you could do it as a digital readiness by phone. I'm not saying it would be easy, but you could take the topics that we talk about and do it by phone. But let's talk about doing it as a virtual presentation. So if you're using Zoom, our video does show you how to facilitate and turn on that share audio feature. That'll be really important, because if you don't turn on that share audio feature, then they will not be able to hear the audio of the videos. So you go through, you play the video, and then you talk about the different points and encourage discussion, if you can, by muting and unmuting the lines, right? You want to mute all except for your audio that's playing on your webinar until you want discussion, and then you can unmute. The other thing that we're finding is if you're dealing with an older adult audience that has never used video conferencing, they don't always know when their camera is on. And so you will sometimes get people joining and you will see this because someone they aren't aware that they're on camera. So that's another thing, is just having someone to help you with controls so you can actually turn cameras off if you're doing a Zoom meeting. If you're doing a Zoom webinar, you can actually make everybody's cameras off by default, and then you don't have to worry about that particular thing. Or, the other issues that come with sharing cameras is, what are people doing on their cameras? What do people want to share? So I had someone on a Zoom call last week that had her parrots in the picture, and it was okay, but it was really distracting for participants. And so my co-moderator actually turned off that camera before I even saw it, and then they sent me a picture later. Anyway, it's the Wild West when you start trying to do your programming this way. But generally, you can turn off cameras, you can turn off their microphones. You have to also remember that people may create audio noise and distraction that you weren't planning on. But it's still great to be able to open up the mics and let everybody talk, if at all possible, because people will share stories about something, that a robocall they've gotten or some kind of email that they've gotten, and it can help you further your examples and your messages. Having said that, one thing I've really been thinking about is having a pre-session where people rename themselves, so it's not my full name on the screen, because what a better place to actually find victims than to be a scammer and to join one of these classes. So I always want to be so optimistic, but I always think about how could this go wrong? And so having a webinar like this where you're trying to give advice and having people reveal things about themselves, whether it's in person or virtual, does come with that risk. So I don't know what tools people are using, but asking people to chat is the safest way because they can't show their camera and they can't say things that you don't want them to be saying, and also all the other audio distractions that can come with a virtual event. But that's what I would say. The discussion piece is always, I learn something new every time I facilitate these trainings. So that's the upside. But it's a challenge nevertheless. Janet, was that thorough enough? Did that answer how you would virtualize this?
Yes. And then just give them options if they need to work with you in person of here we do one-on-one.
I'm sorry, I didn't address that part. So obviously, if they have a family member or friend that they can work with, that's super helpful. And when I know that some libraries are doing virtual help, St. Louis County, I'm pretty sure, is doing virtual help, and we may get to a point of doing some virtual help, but right now I don't have the ability to stand up an effort like that. I know some organizations are also doing one-on-one help where they schedule the time, they have the person come in, they work with them, then they wear gloves, they wear masks, and they sanitize the station after they're done, and they have people come in on a one-on-one fashion. So if your libraries, since we're in Missouri and things can reopen sooner than some other states, you may be able to do something like that.
I had a question about the videos. They're on YouTube. Yes. Are they ready to share on social media sites, or do they need to ask for permission?
It's all shareable, and I've tried to make it as easy for you as possible. So if you go to the Facebook page, which is called @Connections Insider, I just went this morning and did some COVID-19 related text about these videos that you could use. I have not done them in Spanish. I have some text I can use. I do not speak Spanish. And I do have some posts I could do in Spanish. I've just been thinking about doing that, but we'd love you to share them. I post them to Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter. My handle is @AmyVandevelde. I share them on my LinkedIn, and we have, they're on that Facebook page. So those posts are there. Additionally, I've created a social media plan, so if you want to email me, I can share that with you, and it's got a video still, but you can just use the share feature in YouTube as well. We would love you to use them, and in particular, we would love the Spanish language ones to be shared because we have them, and we were able to do them sort of as a bonus, but they haven't been, I don't have any social media spend to pay for a campaign for those. So I'm hoping that they will find their audience through other people sharing them. I mean, the trick you all know with YouTube is if you don't post videos every day and you're not an influencer, the YouTube algorithm doesn't automatically find great content and share it. But we've had videos that do find their way eventually as people share them and have gotten tens of thousands of views. So we'd love it if you'd share them. We'd love it if you share the handouts. So the way that the model is designed, the handouts that accompany each video, link them back to a page on our website that gives them a little more explanatory data and lets them watch the video. Our goal was to do this as an in-person event, and we know that older adults come with paper and pen and they want to take notes about what they heard, and so that's why we created handouts to go with them. I don't know how pertinent that is in a virtual situation because sometimes people don't know how to use a PDF, people don't know how to download things, so that can become a challenge for some, but hopefully it will be things that you can all use.
Okay, and then I had another question asked about how to Zoom. Is that a video? Was
yes.
It on YouTube or was that a guide?
So if you go to YouTube and you search for Oasis Connections, which is our YouTube channel, there is a playlist called Zoom Training, which is for all of you, best practices on how you make use Zoom as a tool to facilitate virtual classes. And then there's Zoom for Participants, and that has a few videos in it. One that I did here, it's right here in my house, about how to set lighting. I was noticing a lot of older adults were joining videos and their lighting was poor. You couldn't see their face. And so I taught them just how to use a light to make sure that there's a light in front of you so that people can see you on your video conference. We've got how to download the Zoom app to a PC. I've got one, I think, on there. I forget. But the other thing I would say, if people are using Zoom, the Zoom website has amazing videos and teaches people how to do a lot of things. The other thing is you're going to get people who are going to participate with a smartphone, and something I've been noticing on a lot of different webinars that I've been on is if you participate on a smartphone and you're watching with your phone, people will say, I can't see the slides. Well, you have to slide over to be able to show the slides because the screen is too small to show everything. So little hints like that can help people a lot.
Okay, great. And then Amy Nicholas commented, she's one of our librarians with Wolfner Library. The Missouri Assistive Technology connects disabled patrons to the tech they need. I just looked up what they recommend for those with no use of their hands, and instead of an iPhone, they provide a Sesame smartphone.
Oh, yeah.
Which uses an operating software similar to the app mentioned in an article shared earlier.
Thanks, Amy. So absolutely. I have seen Sesame demonstrated a few years ago. So Sesame is a phone, I think it's a phone, or at least an operating system that helps people to open their phone with their head or their voice. I mean, it's a really powerful tool. So thank you for mentioning that. And yes, that's right. That's exactly where people should be getting information about people with disabilities and how to help them. There's also a website, and if you give me a second, I'll have to come back and think of what it is. It's called GARI, the Global G-A-R-I, GARI, the Global Accessibility something. They rate different devices for different accessibility features. And so that's an international resource, but they have a great web page that if you're thinking about buying a phone for a person that has a certain use case, you can go out and research that before you buy one. Thanks for reminding me of that, Amy.
Okay, yeah. And she said she's happy to help answer questions, accessibility questions. So I'll add her information in the email with the link to the webinar and the Oasis videos. I'll include a link to the Oasis Connections YouTube page.
Thank you.
So, and Leslie Bauman put in the website for GARI, GARI.info.
Thank you so much. I could navigate all that, but I'd have to move everything around and start Googling things. So, I don't like to be that person that says, did you Google it? But it is amazing what we can find. It's just sometimes people don't know exactly what to search for. And so if we can help them get a little bit further down the road, then they can find the exact information that meets what they need.
That's awesome. Let's see. And I will plug, I've been talking about my colleagues at the Wolfner Library, and that's the Wolfner Talking Book and Braille Library here at the State Library in Jeff City. And they're a great resource. So like I said, I'll put more information and contact information for them. Yeah, I know I was just saying Wolfner Library, and you probably didn't, some people may not, what is that?
So they're probably one of those resources that not everybody knows enough about and should. So right. I'm glad you're mentioning that.
And they work with citizens that are can't use print items as easily as others.
Yes. Great. Oh, and we can talk a little bit about that. So, older adults often are aging into visual changes, but they're not always ready to admit that. And so if you look at these slides, we tried to make them as readable as possible by taking advantage of contrast and colors that would show up well. So this isn't a perfect slide deck by any means, but AT&T does take accessibility standards very seriously. I'm on the AT&T Accessibility Aging and Access Accessibility panel. And so when you see information from AT&T, it is almost always very much adheres to accessibility rules, and not all companies do that. So that's really important to know that at least from creating the materials, the YouTube videos have all been vetted, the slide deck has been vetted to the captions are all, I hand typed all the captions in to make sure they were correct. So we really do try to get accessibility right. We're not perfect, but we really try to get accessibility right, and AT&T does too. So
great. Well, we just have like a few minutes left. So Amy, if someone wanted to start this training at their library, whether it's a public or local or academic library.
Yeah.
I know you talked about that earlier.
Yeah,
in the
I did. I'll say it again. So it's in the presentation. This bit.ly link takes you directly to the page. This is a hidden page that we don't just put out anywhere. But if you need to get a hold of me, I can share it with you for sure. But this takes you directly to the page, and it has everything there. And actually, why don't I just switch my screen to show you the page, because I actually have it open to show you. There's my LinkedIn profile. That wasn't what I meant to stop on. So this is our website, what it looks like today. But this is the AT&T page with all these materials. So I give you the instructions, the script, the PowerPoint presentation are there. Then all the event materials are available in English or Spanish. Then you can download the video files themselves, because if you're ever doing this in a place that you don't have strong internet and you want to show the videos, you may not be able to show them over the internet. So those are available in English and Spanish as well, as along with the one-pager, the handouts for each in English and Spanish. So everything is there. You can jump straight to the videos, and here's that video of me presenting a little bit slower than I did today. And Jody asked about my email address. So my last name is kind of easy and kind of complicated. So it's avandevelde@oasisnet.org. And I'll type it in here. But also, if you Google Oasis Connections Amy V, you'll probably find me because oops, that didn't go to everybody, that just went to Debbie. Debbie, can you reshare that for me? So you can probably find me because I post a lot to social media, and our website should be optimized so you can find me. But feel free to reach out, let me know how it's going. I'm always interested in hearing feedback and helping.
Well, thank you, Amy. This has been very informational and beneficial. So
great. Well, I hope everybody has a great day, and Janet said be safe on the internet. Yes, I hope everybody will be safe on the internet. And I hope that our collective efforts can quash the efforts of cyber criminals. That would be great.
Great. Thank you all. I'm going to stop the recording.